Thank you for coming. I'm David McNeill. I am Digital Director at the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, and we're here today to kick off our programme with a session on leadership in a digital world. So we're looking to talk about what all this change that's come, new technology, the internet, what does it mean for us in the third sector, and what does it mean to be leaders of organisations in this digital world. First of all, I'd just like to quickly introduce you to my panel. So we have David Robb, Deputy Digital Director at the Scottish Government. We have Jess Wade, Board Member at OSCR. Rachel Neaman, from former Chief Executive of Go On UK. And Martyn Wallace, our Chief Digital Officer for Scottish Local Government. And Florence Burke from Music and Hospitals Scotland. Most importantly, though, you are the most important people in the room. We are looking to hear who's in the room. So what I'd like you to do, since this is a digital session, grab your phones, if you can, and type in www.menti.com, and I'll ask you for a code. 309603 is the code. And we're looking to find out who's in the audience. Okay, if we could just change that to the live results. This is what it should look like. Oh, go back. If the Wi-Fi is SECC and you just pop in your email address. So we're looking to find out who's in the room. Are you a disconnected doubter? Are you a basic browser? Are you an enthusiastic explorer? Or are you digital by default? Unsurprisingly, I'm looking at the results coming in here. The first people were digital by default, those that got logged on to the Wi-Fi in about 3 seconds flat. We have no disconnected doubters or basic browsers. Now, I'm slightly not surprised by the disconnected doubters, but they're probably not connected to the Wi-Fi. I don't know if we can see the live results coming up on the screen. They're still coming in. We've got equal numbers of enthusiastic explorers and digital by default at the moment. Great. While we're waiting the results, we'll just keep going. There's 25 people who are enthusiastic explorers in the room, and there's 23 that are digital by default, the high end. So a kind of good balance. There's no basic browsers here. Is there anybody that's disconnected that just wants to raise their hands and say, I'm disconnected? Okay, that's good. We've got a few. It takes all sorts to be in the room today, so we're really glad that you came to this session. So thank you. What we've got, if you've still got that website open, the next question is just asking you for your questions and comments. So some people have already commented already. I'm going to be keeping an eye on these comments and questions as we go along. And if you've got a question for the panel, I'll pass it on. So thank you for just keep going back to Menti and adding in your questions. OK. Now, I'll just ask quickly my panel to introduce themselves and what they do. So starting with you, David.
OK, I don't know if this is working, but good morning. My name is David Robb, and I have two roles here today, and they happily coincide. So my day job for the last, there we go. My day job for the last 5 years has been as Chief Exec of the Scottish Charity Regulator, OSCR, and it's been my immense privilege to do that job and help that organisation, and I hope the charity sector along this exciting digital journey. And probably because I had some enthusiasm for that, last December I was asked to take on a wee part-time role inside the Scottish Government. So on some days of the week I can now be found inside the Digital Directorate, heading a team focusing on digital public services and business transformation. What a mouthful that is. So I spend my life at the moment trying to work out where we are in this world of digital dynamism and uncertainty. I think I'm starting to see some solid shapes in the fog, but it's a rapidly moving territory. And I think the topic here of digital leadership and exploring, well, what would that be like? How can we, in the face of a very uncertain world, a very dynamic environment, how can we give people some direction? How can we try and make the technology work for us, not make the technology be something that defeats us? So that's a common challenge for us. I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. It's great that so many of you have come and signed up for it. That's a really positive sign. And I want to congratulate SCVO in putting together a phenomenal programme of digital events today. They've really shown a lot of leadership on this agenda, and that's to be commended.
Thanks. Jess, just a quick introduction.
Hi everybody, is the mic on? Is it okay? Hi everybody, my name is Jess Wade and I'm a board member of the Scottish Charity Regulator. So I suppose I'm here today in that capacity. In my spare time, when I'm not doing that, I manage an organisation called Self-Directed Support Scotland, which is a small but national organisation supporting local charities to help people navigate the social care sector and their journey through self-directed support. I'm also a trustee of a small local charity in Edinburgh, so I've got a few different perspectives about I suppose different ways of doing things, and in each of the organisations I'm involved with, we've probably approached digital differently. I think the one thing I would say, and especially to the digital doubters, is that what people are identifying themselves as out there, is do you know, sometimes it's maybe not as big as you think, and maybe you're doing stuff that you don't even realise that is digital, and you're maybe starting that journey. So thinking on the way in, I was thinking about, like, at my work, you know, we've used Skype for meetings when that's been beneficial for somebody who couldn't make it into the office due to a long-term condition. And I wouldn't have thought of that as kind of a big thing or a new thing. It was just naturally how we responded to a request that a staff member made to us. So sometimes it's just about making sure you're aware of what the opportunities are that are out there. And I think very much, as David said, it's making it work for you. So it's not necessarily pursuing things because, oh, everybody's doing, for example, Facebook. You know, that might not be the platform for you that works most appropriately, but it's about making sure that you've got enough knowledge and understanding, and I think confidence as well probably comes into it, to make use of the things that are out there when they are going to be useful for you, and make it work for you.
Hello, I'm Rachel Neaman, and most recently I've been working with Martha Lane Fox for the past few years, first as Chief Executive of her charity Go On UK, which was there to ensure that everybody had a basic level of digital skills. There are still far too many people in the UK who are digitally excluded. Before that, I was working at the Department of Health. I was the digital leader there. I was working with Mike Bracken and the Government Digital Service on the first Government Digital Strategy. I've been chair of the Digital Leaders Network, and do a lot of work right across the sectors, third sector, private sector, and public sector. And I'm currently working for myself, which is absolutely fantastic.
Morning, I'm Martyn Wallace, Chief Digital Officer for Scottish Local Government. My office was set up in October last year, so I've been in post for 5 months, and we have the remit to look at how we digitally disrupt and transform local government services. Ideally, we've got a 3 kind of pillar strategy around about leadership. So looking at skills, services, looking at how we redesign services for the digital age, and then foundation in terms of the platforms and technologies we actually use to support the service redesign. This is my first foray into public sector life, and yeah, massive, massive learning curve. So looking forward to today, thanks.
I'm Florence Burke. I'm the Chief Executive with an organisation called Music in Hospital Scotland, and we're probably one of the best kept secrets within health and social care. We deliver around 1,800 concerts or live musical interventions, but we prefer concerts, from Shetland to the Borders, and that's on an annual basis. We're a small charity. There's 6.5 of us in the team. We don't have a digital officer, we don't have an IT person in the office, and we don't have the resources and the reserves to be able to fund that and to fund the development. So one of the things when I came into post last year that I was charged with was to see how could we make some of the step changes that we had to as an organisation with spending as little as possible and hiring as few people as possible as well.
Great. Thank you for all the introductions. Now, I've set out a kind of introductory question for everyone, and just like to kick us off, which is really, there's lots of talk that the digital revolution's already happened, and that we're living in the aftermath. So can you tell us, what that means for you personally, and actually for the work that you do, for the communities you serve, and the organisations that you're involved with? So we'll go back to start. David, public service, and you.
Okay, so yeah, the digital revolution's already happened. I buy that up to a point. I say a lot that it's not the future that's digital; it's the present. We're in it now. The world is digital, and that's not something we get a choice about. That is just a fact. And pretty soon we'll stop using the word digital because it won't have much meaning as a way of describing things. We don't talk about electric toasters anymore. It's just a toaster. And we won't talk about digital public services in 5 years' time. It'll just be public services. So at the moment, the label digital is relevant. I think it will soon become irrelevant. So maybe the revolution is starting to be over, but it's a revolution that never ends. The pace of technological change is absolutely dizzying. 10 years ago, we didn't have iPhones. 10 years ago, all the companies who were kind of the largest beasts in the world made things. Now the biggest corporations in the world don't make things. We've got Chris Yu here working for Uber, who are a firm of immense net worth, and they don't own anything. So the pace of technological change is absolutely bewildering, and the digital agenda is moving on apace. Artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, robots, algorithms, you name it, it will continue to transform the way we do things. Now that can be a bit scary. Some people find even where we are now a bit scary. A few weeks ago we had a dinner organised by a COSVO, and we had a good discussion around the digital challenges in the charity sector. A lot of the senior leaders in that room were being a bit digitally challenged just by getting onto Twitter and engaging with social media. So there's still quite a lot of this stuff that people are nervous about. And the pace and the scale and the all-pervasive nature of it can be a bit terrifying. But my strong message to people is to not be overwhelmed by this. Don't kind of lose your nerve in the midst of all this technology. I work now in the digital directorate, surrounded by people who talk a language I barely understand, and I force them to use simple words of a few syllables to explain what they really mean, because underlying all this technology are some pretty simple things. And for the charity sector, I think digital offers real opportunities to enhance what you already do. So if you think outwards about engaging with your supporters, maybe your trustees, using social media can extend your reach, can get you a quality of communication that you probably always aspired to, but that's now possible. You can have a way of contacting and a dynamic dialogue with your supporters and your governance mechanisms that just wasn't possible before. So that's a fantastic tool for you around the way you run. Internally, if you're a bigger charity, there's lots of tools to make your business simpler, to get the admin, the behind-the-scenes stuff really in a place where that's not drawing your energies. You can put your energies into the stuff that really matters to you as a charity. So digital helps us focus on the things that are really important. It's not an end in itself, it is a means to an end. So you don't let digital be your strategy. Deliver helps you deliver your strategy. And I think for charities, that's a fantastic place to be. Make the technology your servant, focus on connecting with your issues, with your people, with your beneficiaries. That's the real opportunity around digital. So maybe the revolution is kind of over-ish, but I still think we need to seize the opportunities.
Great. And I'm glad to hear you said that the civil service is still full of people and not robots yet. But Jess, from your kind of role as a kind of trustee and your experience, what's your view on this digital revolution?
Well, yeah, I think it's definitely not over yet. There's things to be done. So there's things that OSCR, or the Scottish, the charity regulator, are working on. Looking at how we can get people to be able to enrol, register online is one thing that I think a lot of people would find really beneficial. And it would just simplify the process for everybody. Another thing, which is my own personal bugbear, and I raise it as often as I can, is when you're uploading your charity accounts. At the moment, there can be difficulties with accounts over a certain size. People in the room may have experienced this themselves, and then you have to print it out and post it in, and it's quite frustrating when you're close to the deadline and thinking, oh, I just need to get this in. So there's definitely still work to be done on the part of OSCR, I would say, but I think we're trying to I suppose as a board, we would try to lead by example and be positive about, the things that David said about the need to look at ways to do things digitally when they work for us. And, be positive about making those changes and taking the feedback that we need to take from charities so that we can meet their needs digitally, I guess. And I think, so as a board, we need to lead by example, and for OSCR as well, I think, to try and lead by example in terms of for the sector as a whole. So, there have been efforts to, get the register online, and obviously people can, go in, and I think it's 95% of charities are registered with OSCR online. So that's really, really great. And maybe it's just about finding out why those are the 5% not yet doing it, and how can we maybe support them? Is it something that could be different in the system, or how can we encourage people to get on board with that? I think from my own perspective, in terms of my own work, we work with lots of disabled people and disabled people's organisations, and I would say, another big thing to think about if the revolution is over is, we're still maybe not always there yet in terms of accessibility. So people are maybe looking at different platforms or programs or whatever. Are they building in, actually, have we made sure that our website, you can change the size of the font or the colour? Is it going to work with screen reader technology? These kinds of questions. But again, as technology gets better, these things, will get much easier, I think, because the technology will actually just adapt and deal with them, and the price of technology comes down. And as digital becomes more mainstream, and a really good example of that would be, I'm digressing a bit, but I used to work for an organisation called RNIB, the Royal National Institute of Blind People, and when I worked there, a number of years ago now, if you wanted to get a book to read a story to you out loud, it was really, really expensive, and maybe you had to go to the library and get a talking book. Maybe you could get something like a Kindle, but it was hefty and it was very, very pricey. And then when it became mainstream, the prices just dropped, and you can get anything you want and get it read out loud to you now. So I think as technology improves and becomes mainstream and people see different applications, then actually sometimes adjustments and things can be made easier for people so that everything's accessible for more people.
Okay. The accessibility point is really important, and actually I'd encourage everyone to visit RNIB that are out in the exhibition, because they've got some demonstration of the technology that can be used, and some amazing kind of apps that are transforming lives, so that can be the eyes for people as they're walking around, connecting them to volunteers around the world to be eyes for people with visual impairment. So it's a good point. Rachel, your thoughts?
So I think the digital revolution is by no means over, and I think we've barely begun it, actually. I think that if we look back just a generation, there are things that we are doing today, things that we are using today that we wouldn't even have conceived of a generation ago or less than a generation ago. So in a generation's time, what will we be using that we can't conceive of today? So I think the exciting part of the digital revolution is that it is in its infancy, and the pace of change is absolutely extraordinary. I think alongside that, there is a problem with the way we, as a society, can adapt to that pace of change. And I think the impact digital is having socially, economically, and politically, I mean, just look at what's happening at the moment across the world. We're having presidency by tweet from the other side of the pond. There's a whole new reality in the way people are consuming media and understanding the world through digital technologies. And I think the other thing that is beginning to happen is that we're starting to see some very, very stark dichotomies. So on the one hand, digital is the enabler, digital is the thing that is now the organizing principle of everything we do. However, on the other hand, we have far too many people who are still digitally excluded for a number of reasons, and that's not necessarily reasons within their own control. And that means that we're creating a two-tier society of people who can take on board this mainstream way of living and this way of working and this way of demonstrating and of participating politically, and many others who can't. So that digital divide is getting much, much deeper in terms of impact. So that's a key dichotomy that we're seeing. I think another one is around data. So we talk a lot about big data and the importance of big data and the necessity of big data to help us with medical advances, with all kinds of other incredible new things that are hugely beneficial to us, again, as a society. But on the other hand, if that big data falls into the wrong hands, we see a lot of damage being done. A lot of this is about people not really understanding the implications of this new technology, which is now all around us. So the technology is growing faster than we can really keep up with it. We have people who aren't able to keep up with it or to consume it in a way that we're expecting them to, which is disadvantaging them in many ways. So I think one of the things that still hasn't really come to the fore in this digital revolution is digital ethics and the ethics of using digital as our mainstream single way of working, of living, and of being politically active. So, and I think, you asked David about personal issues. I think, a lot of this has prompted my work, particularly on digital inclusion, but also on looking at how businesses and organizations, whether they're charitable organizations or big corporates, need to reorganize themselves structurally and from a sort of cultural and mindset point of view in order to be able to keep up with this ever-changing reality. So I think it's a very exciting time. I think it's also a time where we need to become much more sophisticated in how we think and engage about digital, because otherwise it will outpace us. And in the horror scenario, we'll have the robots taking over the world, and we won't be able to control them.
Thanks, Rachel. And that segues nicely into Martyn about kind of the ethics and kind of putting services online. You're responsible for local government and the digital services. What's your view on this digital revolution?
I actually cheated, I will be honest. For the how is this going to affect me personally, I asked my 14-year-old daughter this morning, who's living with me for the week, and I said, she calls me Daddy Geek because I've got the house connected. I can talk to put my lights on, my heating, my kettle, my coffee machine, the CCTV at the front door. I can switch the car lights on, switch the air conditioning on in the car. You have people at the start of the bell curve in terms of early adopters. I'm probably way, way ahead of that as well. It's still a mystery why I live alone, to be fair. But anyway, so I asked my daughter, and she said, it means that Dad has got more opportunities to install new and exciting kit in his connected home, car, motorbike. However, and this is the key point I liked, is fundamentally the data that is produced and new advancements in artificial intelligence, such as Amazon Alexa, Siri, or Cortana, means a lot of basic and rudimentary tasks can be picked up by computers, and Dad can get on with more important, productive things like spending money on his daughter, in personal and work life as well. How this transposes into local government, if we look at the lie of the land, we've got a 2 to 3% reduction in budgets over the next few years. We've also got Brexit on the horizon, which means we don't know what the budgets are going to look like. We've got an ageing population. We've got challenges in delivering services. So digital fundamentally can help get the outcomes we want for the citizen whilst reducing costs to serve. Now, going back to kind of digitally excluded, absolutely, that's a key concern for myself and the team. I think if we can reduce the cost at the back end, for the back end process and stuff, and move as much traffic online as possible, we'll then have budget to spend on the have-nots and the frontline services that actually critically need it most. We cannot leave the socially, economically, or digitally disadvantaged on this journey because the pace just keeps on going. But there's opportunities out there in terms of technology. We don't have to look at big data as such. We don't have to look at virtual reality. We don't have to look at 5G, super fast fiber broadband and stuff. A simple text is enough to actually remind somebody to take statins so they don't end up in hospital. I did this 10 years ago with hospitals down south. I think also kind of my nirvana that I look at is a thing called digital place, where we have data systems or data ecosystems which are secure and open, talk to each other. And what I mean by that is if you look at Police Scotland in a previous role I was in, said that 60% thereabouts of their interactions on a day-to-day basis are with vulnerable people. So they have a data set on that. Social work have got a data set on people they actually talk to on a day-to-day basis. Fire service have got a data set on people who hoard or could cause an injury to themselves, setting fires or hoarding flammable goods, etc. We've got third sector organisations out there like yourselves who have data sets on people you deal with in the community. How about we combine those data sets, apply business intelligence or artificial intelligence rules to look for the flags to intervene early? So we go back to Christie Commission principles about early intervention. We look at that to prevent the excessive spend later on and improve lives. Second example I would use, there's a council in the north of England set out a question, because you can have as many data sets as you want, okay, but you have to start with a question. What is the outcome? And the question they set themselves was, how do we spot more troubled families? So they went to housing associations and said, you've got an indication of when there's a troubled family you're dealing with, what do you look for? And they said, holes in walls, damage to furniture, damage to doors and windows. So they took data set from that. They took data set from education to look at kids that were playing truant from school or sleeping in class or having troubles in class. They took data sets from A&E, funnily enough, for strange marks, etc. Took some data from third sector organisations, pulled it together, and I think they identified over 100 more troubled families they didn't have in the system. So that's kind of the power of the data. And obviously there's ethics pieces there in terms of the right to actually share that data across the diaspora. I completely get that. From a personal perspective as well, we expect more digital experiences as consumers. We always go for the next greatest and best iPhone, Android phone, iPad, laptop, etc. We deal with Amazon, Netflix, Google every single day. So trying to transform the local government services to have similar experiences is, again, part of the remit and the challenge that we have as a team to get into that next stage and then look beyond what can we predict for the future. But that also is bringing on the staff skill sets as well, because that's, again, crucial to actually get the culture shift. Deloitte's issued a paper in October last year, just as I started, saying tons of jobs will go across local government and organisations due to artificial intelligence. I cannot stop that tide, but how do I help my staff get to that next stage so they've actually got the skill sets to keep abreast of that technology? And another personal perspective is my ageing parents. My mum's got MS and has done for 20 odd years. In fact, more than that, to be fair. She's been in a wheelchair for 10. My dad had a stroke last year, and then trying to support them, interacting with different public services and third sector organisations was horrendous. 12 bits of paper to get my dad discharged from hospital and get support in the house. My dad said to me, and he's 70, how can I not have a Netflix experience? I went, what are you talking about, Dad? He said, I want to see, if I'm going for this issue, the other things that might benefit me, and I just tick a box rather than filling all these paper. His next question was Amazon Dash. Amazon Dash is a small button you press to replenish, toilet rolls and razor blades and stuff. He said, can I get one of them for my repeat prescriptions instead of phoning the doctor and toddling down and phoning this? A simple, straightforward view of the world. When he got home, he asked for Wi-Fi lights to help him and my mum get around the house. He did complain after 2 days because he said that after 45 years of marriage, he developed selective hearing, and now my mum uses it like a discotheque to attract his attention. But I think that's more about user interface than actual technology. So, there's a big opportunity to use digital to transform lives and get the outcomes we want, but obviously we have to look at the ethics and the have-nots as well on that journey.
Okay, thank you. Florence, I'm going to give you you've got a few slides, so.
This is just to, I'll wait. This is just to show my digital prowess with the clicker here in my hand. We didn't set out the seating order here, but you'll find that I'm at the other end of the bell curve from Martyn, which you'll probably see from the presentation that I'm about to give you, which is really focusing on my own journey in the organisation. I wasn't sure where to start with this presentation, so I thought I'd maybe reveal my alter ego. For those of you who aren't familiar with her, this is the lovely actress Catherine Parkinson. Some of you will know from a variety of TV programmes, Doc Martin and other things. But what we share is the character Jen, which this photo is of from the IT Crowd, which was a sitcom on TV, which was basically a hapless bunch of individuals who formed the IT department within a major corporation. Jen headed up that department. She was recruited by someone who was equally computer illiterate as she was, but was successful in getting the job as head of the IT department because she knew about clicking and double clicking. And to a certain extent, coming along to this meeting today to talk about digital strategies and my digital role, I feel in a similar position to Jen in that. Like Jen, it was a bit of a shock to my system when I joined Music and Hospitals to find out that I wasn't just heading up how we were moving those things, that basically I was it. And the IT stood for you are it, you are the digital being in this organisation. Start to look at what we do and how we could do it better. So what I knew, when Jen became Employee of the Month, she was asked to give a presentation, probably similar to this, and to talk about her work and the internet. This is what Jen thought the internet was and what she was given to take to the presentation. She managed to break the internet, and even now, I'm not too surprised that that might happen because I don't understand electricity and I understand how the internet works even less than that. When anything digital's mentioned, I do get a bit of a brain freeze, even now. It's a bit of fear and confusion. People have mentioned that. I think it's perfectly natural. I'm sure as we moved from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age, or whatever order it was, everybody was a little bit concerned. But seeing it as something natural and a natural progression for us. So as far as I was concerned, and David touched on it and others have, digital was something that was done by specialists who spoke their own language and understood about algorithms. That wasn't me. So where would I begin to start? So I'm hoping you appreciate that I have moved on since then. But where I'd like to be is again the lovely Catherine Parkinson, this time in the TV drama Humans. Humans was set in a parallel now. I love these descriptions of TV programs. And in it, we'd moved on where the must-have gadget for the home, I think Martyn may be getting one soon, was a synth, which was basically a robotic servant. And these synths were becoming conscious. And Catherine had developed an understanding of all things technological that she was now an ally for them, and her capacity as a lawyer was actually standing to support the ethics of them having a consciousness of their own. So I would want to be in a similar role, but I'm certainly nowhere like that just now. The light bulb moment for me really has been, in my day-to-day life, I have been using digital. You know, we've touched on it. Phones, was it toasters, Smart printers. You know, we look at all of these things, uploading photos to the cloud. My light bulb moment that was for me was, as a charity, there was a lot of things that everybody as a staff member and a trustee was using day in and day out. And we didn't for 1 minute think that it was digital or part of a digital strategy. What I did in the organisation was to stop talking about digital and to start thinking about what we currently used and how we could bring that into the charity to make it work for us. And that was things that were free, or things that had little cost, but things that people were familiar with, and we didn't then have to start looking at specialist training, specialist individuals coming in to do it for us as well. So that was where I'd like to be. Where I'm actually at, and we seem to be quoting children here as well, Martyn and I, I'm going to quote my son when I was talking about this session. Once he'd stopped laughing at the fact I was coming to talk at a session about digital leaders, he said, so you're going to talk about using things to do stuff. And that's what I've been doing my whole working life, and what I'm continuing to do, whether it's got digital in front of it or not, and it's really not a bad place to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence.
Well said.
That's a kind of great story of you as a leader of an organisation and where you want to be. I mean, this idea of digital leadership is a bit of a buzzword that goes around at the moment. What do others think? What does it mean to you, this idea of digital leadership?
Well, it could mean two things. It could mean deploying digital technology to help you as a leader. I don't know quite how you would do that. I think for me, I find it more helpful to think about leading in a digital world and in digital organizations. And the skills you need to do that are no different to the skills you would need in a pre-digital era. So digital leadership shouldn't be something that we feel is inaccessible. There is, it's been really interesting listening to fellow panelists here, but there is a sense that until quite recently there's been a kind of digital Freemasonry that, you know, we feel a bit excluded from, and, you know, people talk a language that's, you know, not accessible to us, and you know, I have people working in my team in the digital directorate, and they have roles that I didn't know existed 3 months ago, and so there is a specialist kind of language that can be quite can create a distance that's not necessary. But I think the technology now is moving to a place where it's being put in the right position. We're starting to take control of the technology. I don't fear about, you know, robots, kind of the Terminator agenda. That doesn't keep me awake at nights. I think it's really important to think about ethics and to link with a discussion I know that was happening here yesterday about rights. And I think it's really interesting to think about people's rights in an environment where data about us is being held and exchanged, and I think we're only scratching the surface of that. You know, the important discussions we have about data protection, cybersecurity, whatever, I think we've got a long way to go before we can feel properly in control of that. But I do think we need to be clear that the technology works for us. You know, sometimes it feels like it's a solution looking for a problem. So, you know, the technology does move on ahead, and people, you know, invent things, and then they think, well, I wonder what that would be useful for. And we need to flip that around and say, look, we know what our organizations need. We know what we're trying to do. How can technology be deployed to help us do that? And there's some fantastic examples. One of the exciting bits about my new job is working with a thing that there's a session on later today. If you're not signed up to go and hear the CivTech, please go and have a listen. So CivTech is what they call a digital accelerator or incubator project. That sounds terrible. What they did is they got a group of public sector organizations, and they said, bring us your problems. And they got a group of technical companies who pitched their ideas to help solve these problems. So it was real-world problems in public services, and techie folk who said, let's see what we can do with the internet. So I'll just give you one example. The transport section of the Scottish Government said, we'd like to see what you could do about potholes. Now, potholes, we all know, anybody who drives, are a huge problem. And you wouldn't immediately think that you could apply digital technology to the pothole problem, but that's what the Transport Scotland brought into this process. They said, see, what could you do about potholes? So a whole range of geeky folk said, right, let's see what we could do. And this one company pitched an idea. So what they've done is they've taken all the data that you are innocently acquiring from your smartphone as you drive along a road. So there's a wee accelerometer, the thing that counts the steps that you make. As you're driving, your phone is collecting a profile of the road surface. And if you collect enough of these profiles, you can generate a digital map of the state of the road. So you can get a map of where the potholes are. You can even, by applying algorithms, you can even predict where the worst potholes will develop. So you can send out your expensive road maintenance teams to fix the potholes as they're developing and save a shed load of money. Just by collecting data from a phone that's sitting on the dashboard of a council van. So there are opportunities to make the technology work for you, solve the problems that you've got, and I think that's the right way around to look at it. It's not technology-led, it's problems-led. The charity sector is all about meeting needs, finding innovative solutions. I think there's huge opportunities for charities to embrace the possibilities that digital can offer us. But we need to keep it in its place, make sure that, you know, we remain the masters. I'm not worried about the robots. I'm worried about Martyn. I think he's got a synth in his wardrobe. He just hasn't told us yet. But we need to make the technology work for us.
Okay, thank you, David. Just pick it. I think Rachel was keen to come in, and there's a question here from the audience as well around how on the digital leadership piece. How do we convince leaders in the sector that they don't need to be digital experts to lead in a digital world?
Absolutely, it's an extremely good question. So I've actually had digital leader in my job title several times in my career, and I've got no idea what that really means. I'm not a techie. I don't have a technical background. But what I do is I understand the application of that technology for social, for economic, for political advancement, which frankly is, I think, all you need as a digital leader. So if you are in a position of leadership in any form of organization, whether that's a charity, whether that's public sector, whether that's a business, or even in a community group of some variety, you need to understand how using digital technology will help you do your thing. It's exactly what Florence was saying about using things to do stuff. How does digital help you do your stuff better, more efficiently, more effectively, saving money, providing better service to whoever your customers, users, consumers, whatever, are, citizens. That I think is the important thing. So going back to that question about how do you convince people that you don't have to say, I need a specialist over here, this is where I'm going to leave it to my IT department because they know everything. You need to have a very good IT department or geek person like Martyn, in order to apply that technology. But you, as the person running or organizing your work, need to understand how that's going to help you, because you need to be able to tell them how to help you to do that. So it's not about saying, let's leave it just to techie people and I don't need to worry about that. It's absolutely, the business strategy is a digital strategy. It's how do you use digital to help you. So the key thing is to convince senior leaders or boards or whoever it is that you need to convince that this isn't a techie role. This is about applying technology to be the best you can be in whatever field it is that you're doing.
Okay. Just Martyn and then Florence.
I was going to come in. I absolutely agree. I think the first question you have to ask if you're looking at digital is, what's the business outcome forget the technology. What do I actually want to achieve? When I used to coach, in a previous role, we used to coach some blue chip companies and the boards, etc. there in terms of this digital age and digital revolution. The key questions were, first of all, what is the outcome? Second was, what's the best experience you've got on your mobile phone that you like? What's your favourite app? How can you take the lessons learned from that app into your organisation? So if it was things like Amazon, it would be ease of use for shopping, just that one click to make a choice. If it was something like Airbnb to book a room, it's about that having that selection of choice and then making a booking and just that ease of use in terms of the process. Take those fundamental learns from that process back into the business. The other key things with some chief execs in particular was if they had the techie people to try and talk the same parlance, you might be able to use this, David, is number one was the business outcome. Number two, is it mobile? If not, why not? So we now consume the internet on mobile phones more than any other device out there in the market. So is it mobile? So that could be an app, it could be through the web browser, does it render? Or is it just a simple text? Because text still has an influence. 93% of people who get a text will read it within 20 minutes of actually receiving it. Because you still, we're back to the old Nokia days with the wee envelope in the corner. We've got that inkling to look at a text. The next piece was, is it in the cloud? If not, why not? Now, the cloud is a massive, massive thing, okay? I'm not going to go through explaining everything in the cloud, but the cloud just gives you flexibility. Somebody else somewhere is actually doing it for you, okay? A trusted source, you just get on and do what you have to do best in terms of, charity organisation work, etc. And then the data. The data is the fuel for all of this. So when you look at that business outcome, what data do you actually need for that outcome to support that outcome? And that's it. That's as simple as it has to be. In terms of technology and stuff, you can look out in the market if you want to, or you get a specialist. But outcome, data, and inputs is basically, that's the recipe for it.
Thanks. Florence and then Rachel.
I think my response was really, as a small charity without an IT person, without access to that native guide to do the translation for us, it's very, very difficult. So our business need was first identified that we've got a server, probably like a lot of people, that's a box that sits under one of the desks in the front office that we've got. We took the decision that we would move to a cloud-based server, tiny little office. If we were looking to recruit more staff, they couldn't physically be based in the office. So we would look to move to the cloud. That decision was taken, managed to convince the board, but we didn't have the financial resources to do it, and we didn't know who to go to that we could trust to do it for us. And it's that bit of trust that what you're being sold, if you are investing in some of these initiatives, that you're not being sold a pig in a poke. And it's not a shiny toy that you're told, here is what this can do, and you're still not clear if that's what you need it to do for you. And that conversation with someone who's able to translate your needs to what can be delivered, even by some of the free software and the common stuff that's out there, is absolutely critical. And I think it's something that if the smaller level in the sector, the smaller and medium-sized charities that don't have access to the resources to tap into specialists, where do we get those resources, and how can we identify the trusted intermediaries, if you want for a better term?
Rachel and then Jess.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. I think that's hugely important. And I want to pick up on both of those points. And Martyn, your point about people need to accept that what you do in your private life can be equally translated into your working life. And that's something, again, that quite often we go into work and we see that we've got very old, aging IT equipment, or we've got policies that say you can't possibly use any cloud-based app or anything like that. And you think, well, that's just crazy. We need to make technology as easy to use in the workplace as it is in your private life, because frankly, most of us do something digitally in our private life, even if we don't do everything digitally in our private life. But I think the very important thing is, if you're a small organization without the resources, where do you get that advice? How do you know? And I think this is something that the third sector needs a lot of support on, is having that trusted IT support, if you like, or digital support, or technical support, or whatever it is. It's not about spending money, necessarily. It's not about having the latest just because you can. It is purely about doing enough to do what you need to do.
Jess.
Just to pick up on that point as well, I think in terms of you know, obviously there's organisations out there to support the voluntary sector, SCVO, you know, clearly being one of them. But I think the other thing that we're very, very good at in the sector is speaking to each other, you know, and speaking to other organisations and saying, actually, guys, how did you do that? And I think, again, it's this common theme of just because it's digital doesn't mean you suddenly have to do it in a different way. So an example from mine would be, a recent work-related example, is we were using a particular courier company, and they were really letting us down all the time. We didn't really get on with them. They were quite frustrating to work with. Didn't really know where else to go. So actually I was at an event with another organisation who we work with all the time. They'd had their stuff couriered. And I just said to them, oh, which company are you guys using? And are they good? And do you trust them? And all the rest of it. So it's the same principles. Do you know, if you know an organisation that's gone through this and, you know, sort of progressed it or whatever, you know, pick up the phone. And most people, I think in the sector, that's one of our real strengths is people will work collaboratively. And, you know, happy to talk things over, happy to share ideas. So don't be scared to approach people that have done it and say, actually, and, you know, and if it is, you maybe sometimes you do need to spend a little bit of money. Maybe sometimes you do need, like you say, to approach a company. How do you know that they're trusted? Has anybody else used them? And can they give you feedback?
Yeah. And I think lots of the work that we've done at the moment has actually been about connecting people to each other, because actually there's lots of people say, what's the best solution for having a database that will improve our monitoring and evaluation? Well, there's lots of solutions, and actually you need to find out what's best for you, and actually by finding what other people have gone through, it's perhaps the best way.
I was going to make a plug for the OneDigital programme, because I know it's opened again, but that had been absolutely invaluable, because it wasn't just people saying, here's what we've done, here's what we've used. It was people saying, here's what didn't work for us. Here's the bits that we tried, and if we had our time over again, we would do this differently. And it's that openness about failure that has been invaluable for us. And people saying, you know, come down, we'll show you what it looks like in practice, because there's a lot of people out there trying to sell you an awful lot of things as well. And it's saying the practical bits for us as a charity, what does it look like? So no, the programme's been invaluable for that.
Thank you. And I think that openness to failure is a challenge for us. You know, we've got the regulator here, but we do need to learn from failure, because that's where we learn.
I think it's that bit, is it not failure? You've piloted something, I think, is the technical term.
I think the modern line is fail fast and improve, you know. Just kind of picking up on some of the audience questions that are coming in around risks. Actually, what are the risks for people of being constantly connected? Is this fear of kind of data protection? Is it stopping third sector organisations getting online, doing things that are more innovatively, cheaper, using all these tools? Martyn?
I mean, you have to have calculated risks in these things. Security is obviously paramount, but you can't use security as a disabler for actual advancement. You know, we have different interpretation of the rules. We see horror stories in the press every single day about things like ransomware attacks, where a hacker takes over your laptop and you have to pay them money to get it back online. You see things about data breaches and stuff. Security should be the heart of it, but you shouldn't be too scared of it. You have to look at what can you control, what mitigated risks have you taken to actually control that data, and you get on with it. I think also risks are things like leaving other people behind as you advance, or risks of, oh, I have to wait for the next best thing. You know, you can innovate from simple, straightforward technology. You're talking about the free, you know, solutions out there and stuff as well. You could use things like WordPress just for a blog, just to get your charity actually recognised, you know, just for the website piece. Twitter is free in terms of that social media piece. That's your first inkling into it. But I think in terms of the risk is, you know, calculated with the reward. You have to take risks in this world. And going back to the failing thing, fail fast. You prototype something, you learn from it. You don't go out with a standard set of requirements and you find after a year of implementing it, actually it's not actually what we needed and it looks really bad. You actually go back a stage and say, right, for a month I'm going to try this, and then I'm going to get lessons learned, and if the lessons are good, then I'm going to continually just keep evolving that. It's what they call agile methods. These things are there to mitigate that risk, but, you know, take a risk.
Rachel?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are risks in absolutely everything we do. There are risks in answering the telephone. You get phoned up by somebody telling you they're Microsoft support and they're going to help you with your computer. How they know it's your computer thereafter, I never quite understand. But there are risks in absolutely everything we do. So this is about taking calculated business risks about this is a new world that we're in. There's a risk in crossing the road. There is a risk in putting your data in the cloud potentially, but there is equally a risk in walking into in taking money out of an ATM because somebody else might be standing behind you and reading your PIN number and pickpocket your card, whatever. So I think it's just where we're going. However, the very important thing is to understand what steps need to be taken to maintain your security. And I think there are some quite basic things that people don't always understand. For example, if you're using an open Wi-Fi system, which I'm sure we are all doing in here, don't have a look at your bank account while you're listening to this, because other people will be able to look at your bank account too, if they are clever enough to do that.
Probably Martyn.
Yes, exactly. Martyn's probably already got his devices all linked up to your bank account. So there are some very, very basic, sensible rules that not everybody thinks about. So there are certain things that everybody knows. Don't share your password, don't click on this link. But there are other things, like using Wi-Fi on the bus to check your bank balance, that people don't necessarily think is particularly dangerous. So there's an education issue, there's taking sensible precautions, but then there is being proportionate in risk-taking and making that cost-benefit judgment that you do in every other aspect of your life.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want some regulatory wisdom around risk? Risk's a funny thing. It's one of these words like change and innovation and whatever, and you have a kind of emotional reaction to the word risk. But I think it's absolutely right. Everything is risky. Staying where you are, the status quo, not engaging with this is taking a risk. So you cannot avoid risk. All you can hope to do is assess the landscape you're in and be alive to where the risks are, manage those properly, and in the world of technology, just the same as in every other aspect of your business, you won't get it right all the time. I think it's quite heartening now that the cost of the technology is coming down, so you can, with a relatively modest investment, kind of dip your toe in this. If it doesn't work, you've not lost a great deal. And small organisations, not just in the charity sector, small and medium-sized enterprises right across the country are trying to engage with the digital world because it just matters for everybody now, for every business. Small public sector organisations don't have massive IT departments. We're all looking for help. We need that trusted advice. But staying where you are, not engaging with this, could be just as big a risk because things are moving on. I talked earlier about the whole new corporations growing up in the space of a few years. There will be charities busy now that in 10 years' time will dominate our sector, and they're doing things using a business model that nobody in this room has even thought about yet. So standing still might be your biggest risk.
Just on the risks piece, and we've talked a lot, and there's quite a few questions about the inclusion piece, about leaving citizens, people behind. How do we address that challenge? Rachel.
You're looking at me. It is a big challenge, and for those who don't know the figures, it's almost 1 in 4 UK adults lack the 5 basic digital skills that we expect everybody to have in order to be able to live successfully in this digital world. So it's a huge problem. 38% of small and medium-sized businesses, 49% of all charities. So it's a huge, huge, huge issue. And I mean, I could talk forever about this, and I promise I won't. But there are huge numbers of organisations doing fantastic work to help reduce this number. SCVO, the OneDigital Coalition, huge numbers of people. I'm sure many of you in this room. But it's something that does have to be thought about and does need to be part of the business strategy. So if you're working for a charitable organisation, who is your audience? Who are you trying to reach? Now, your donors, the people who may fund you, may all be digitally included, and you may want to reach those in a purely digital way. The people, your beneficiaries, the people you're trying to help, may not be so digitally included. So it's about really understanding your audience, your market, and making sure that the way you're communicating and the way you're interacting and doing business is appropriate to those different organisations. And I think, digital is absolutely the way forward, but digital is not the only way of engaging with people or of doing what you need to do. Internally, you can save money by having slick digital processes or using automated processes instead of employing people, all that sort of stuff. But the key thing is, are you actually engaging with the people that you need to reach? I'm not sure I've really answered the question because, frankly, how do you tackle digital exclusion is a really, really, really long one, and I don't think I better start that because otherwise we'll be here this time next week. So, but catch me afterwards if anyone wants to talk about it.
Yes.
It's maybe not quite the same issue, but I think it's close. And it maybe touches on some of your work, Martyn, is I think as well, it's not just about who you're trying to reach, but it's also thinking about what the limitations are around digital work and what it can't do. Yeah. Because I think you're spot on, like something like a text message to remind you to take something fantastic, absolutely brilliant. But, you know, then when we're looking at social care and just how tight the funding is, and, you know, there's the temptation as to, you know, what can you introduce that will save more money and save more money and save more money? Why are we saving that money? If we're saving it so that we can free people up to spend more time with people, which, let's face it, is often what people are looking for, that's great. Yep. But I think it's just about being careful. And the other thing is thinking about impact in terms of, again, for a lot of smaller organisations, things like social media, you know, and most organisations probably will have a social media policy in place nowadays, but it is still a risk that, you know, if you're engaging your service users and your volunteers on social media, how are you sort of managing those relationships? What things have you got into place to make sure that, yeah, everything's going along the lines that you want, and that, you know, maybe policies you have in place for sort of face-to-face interactions, you know, are similarly being applied, but in an appropriate way to a social media setting, I think.
Just something I wanted to add, actually, given your comment, Jess, on social care, is also there's a big trust element in this. So one thing that I don't think is exploited enough, and I know there are plenty of reasons why this isn't always possible, is where you've got a trusted intermediary, those are the people that are going to be more successful in getting the excluded to engage digitally than if you are told by the government or by a big organisation or by a teacher or whatever that you have to go online. So we talk about giving health visitors tablets so that they can go in, and I don't mean tablets to swallow, I mean electronic tablets, so that when they go off and visit elderly people in their home, they can start to demonstrate the benefits of the internet, because this is all about what's in it for me. Why should I go online? I've not needed to do this for 83 years, or I've not needed to do it for 67 years, or I've not needed to do it for 25 years. Why should I? So the key thing is to plug into somebody's personal motivation for going online, and often it is about need. Yep. And it is that intermediary, particularly when we're talking public services, that is that trusted person that can help someone get online. There are reasons people aren't online. There's no one reason people aren't online, so it's a complex. Trying to solve digital exclusion is a complex issue. It may be because people don't have the skills, or there isn't the infrastructure available, or they can't afford the cost of a device, or they can't afford a subscription. If you're feeding your family from a food bank, you're not going to be spending £30 a month on a broadband subscription. So, you know, it's complex, but I think it's the people who are closest to the end user who have the most opportunity to help those people get digital.
And I think just to make a quick sales pitch, to say, come and visit us at the Digital Participation stand, because the Digital Participation Charter, that's the focus now going forward, that we know that those in the digital divide are not going to be convinced by a kind of slick marketing campaign. They're not going to walk into the library themselves to go to a computer class, and it's crucial that organisations that are tackling poverty and inequality embed this into their kind of day-to-day work, and we're there to provide support to do that. Martyn?
I was actually going to pitch your Digital Participation Charter, get yourself signed up and promote to, you know, friends who are in different companies around Scotland to actually sign up to it for a start, because I think it's a great tool to actually help get the have-nots online and also try to find the benefit. Yeah. It is definitely a personal thing. I worked with a housing association in the past who had a goal of 93% of their interactions would be online. As part of that, they had to take the customer, in terms of the housing, on that journey with them. So they issued tablets, and then basically worked out individually what the kind of the hook was. You have to find that hook to make it personable. they now have that goal met, I think, a year in advance, because people saw the whole new opportunities they could open up by having that tablet for job searching, for banking, for shopping, for actually interacting with the local council, etc. So it is a very, very much personal thing. It is a long-winded thing. There's people who will just never get it, never want to get it, don't see the benefit of it. But we have got that ageing population now going, towards the end. We've got the kind of the younger generation coming through who expect, nothing. Any person under the age of 28 will not realise a world without broadband. That's a scary statistic. I remember fax modems with that squeaky noise, which sounds like modern day pop music, but that's really showing my age. But I think in terms of, that continuation is going to be there. We're going to have the socially excluded, but how do we support them? And you're right, the public sector organisations could be that front line. They could actually help them be online with them. They get to see that benefit, and then they start to actually want to take an interest and then move on to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to pick up on something you just said, Martyn, which is where you talk about older people and younger people. I just want to be really clear that there is a bit of an urban myth about all older people are offline or can't do it or won't do it, and they're all going to die anyway, so that's problem solved, and that all young people can do it because they've been brought up with it and so on. Of course, younger people have been brought into a world where digital media is all around them, and the majority of them are all, A+ at communicating digitally and Snapchatting and WhatsApping and all the other things that our children do and irritate all of us. But what they can't necessarily do is apply the mechanics of using a digital interface to the kinds of things they're going to need to do in their lives. So how do you look for a job? How do you apply for a job online? How do you fill in an application form? How do you do all of this? So I think we have to be quite careful when we think about who are the excluded and why, not to make too many assumptions, because as ever, the devil's in the detail. And it is about really understanding the needs of your particular audience.
Since you brought up Snapchat and social media, actually there's quite a few questions on kind of social media. And I think a lot of the conversations around the third sector and digital, the word have been dominated around social media. So where does social media fit into this? And particularly in terms of leadership, is it just about leaders being on Twitter? Florence?
I am on Twitter, but I'm not allowed onto the official Twitter account because it takes me too long to tweet. So it's the fat finger syndrome that I have. I think that for me, whether it's the digital leader tweeting or whether it's the organisation tweeting, it's a communication channel that you have. So it still has to fit into your communication plan. It can't be the risk that we talked about. It can be just as much a risk. We mentioned what's happening the other side of the pond. It can be just as much a risk for the leader to be free to go where they want to go, what they want to say, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook or one of these other channels. So I think it still has to be seen as part of that, and you're still tweeting as part of the communication and to the audience that you're looking to reach. And it may be that Twitter isn't the right medium for all of the audiences that you want to reach. It may be that Facebook isn't the right medium for that as well. For a number of our supporters and donors, they still like old school. So it's still letters, it's still that form of communication. So it's about knowing your audience, but recognising that your audiences will be changing and making sure that you're addressing that, but still with policies and practices in place. So whether you're the leader of the organisation or not, you're still reined in when you need to be.
I think from social media point of view is what's the message? What you actually wanted to say, what's the outcome? And then start back in terms of what the best communication medium is going to be. Absolutely, you've got multiple different channels out there, Facebook, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Periscope, variety of different tools, and a lot of you are probably going, well, what are you even talking about? But I think is find out where your communities lie, and it's all about the community engagement piece. Be open and trusted. Again, previous life, I helped set up the business to consumer social media stuff for O2, and we created fans. That's what we wanted to do, creating customers into fans. That wasn't my strapline, that was marketing strapline, may I add. But it was all about fandom rating in terms of how many people do we have advocating for our organisation. But at the same time, it's not about the amount of followers you have either. I mean, look what Jesus did with only 12. We have to look at it, take a reality check and the whole piece of this. For social media to actually work, it is just that community engagement. And the biggest piece of advice for Twitter or any social media platform is don't put anything out that you wouldn't want to see in the papers the next day. That's probably the best bit of advice I can give.
Rachel?
Yeah, absolutely. These are tactical tools. These are part of your armory in the same way as other forms of communication, exactly as Florence said. But this isn't your strategy. Your strategy is not, I need to have a Twitter feed because I need to have Twitter. Yep. It's only going to work if the people that you need to reach are also on Twitter and are using that. And when you are using Twitter, you also need to use it properly and right, and use hashtags and use handles, because if you're not using the hashtag, then people aren't going to see it because it's not going to pop up in anybody's feed. So there are some very basic rules, which are, if you're going to do it properly and do it appropriately for the audience. So it's part of your strategy, it's a tactical part of your strategy. I think the other thing is around privacy. So remember, I think, and this is something that perhaps young people find more difficult, is that quite often you think you're just talking to your community or to your people or to the people who follow you or to the people that you know. But you're not. This is public. This is exactly like standing on top of a bridge and broadcasting through a megaphone. So, is that the impression that you want to give of yourself, of your organization? In some way, I remember when I was in the civil service, I was told there is no such thing as tweeting in a personal capacity, because what you are doing is you are representing and presenting yourself as part of this bigger organization. Now, we could debate that, it's a moot point, but there is an issue that if you're associated with an organization, whatever you say is going to be taken as representing the views of the organization, or will color the way people see the organization. So I think this idea that there is a Chinese wall between a private tweet or a private account and a public one is completely blurring now, and I don't really think that's appropriate. So I think the whole privacy thing, the fact it's part of a strategy, but it isn't the only strategy. If you're going to do it properly.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to take the opportunity, if there's anybody that wants to ask some questions. There's been some coming through online. We've not got through them all. But if there's any of the disconnected doubters in the audience that want to ask a particular question of the panel, we'll give you a few moments to think about it. The kind of one question that's all coming through was around, if this is about the third sector and the problems that we're trying to solve, has anybody seen some areas, some problems that are ripe for solving using technology? David?
I think there's a lot of ways in which technology can help people, maybe older people living at home, dealing with social isolation. For a lot of people, social media, Facebook is a great way of keeping in touch with family who are at a distance, friends they don't see, just having some sort of social interaction. People often, say, well, it's digital, it's not real, but actually I think some of these communities that can grow up in cyberspace can be very real and meaningful for people. So I think there's fantastic opportunities to connect and support people dealing with isolation. Martyn's mentioned some of the medical applications. There's phenomenal things we can do there to be smarter about giving people control over chronic conditions or in emergency situations. There's a whole range of really life-changing applications of technology around some medical conditions. I mean, I think that, I've always thought of the charity sector as the R&D wing of the public sector. Charities go into the places public organisations are too slow and unimaginative to get to, and they come up with brilliant solutions. I think the same will happen in the digital field. Charities will be the place for creativity and innovation to find a solution, and eventually the public sector will come along and institutionalise it and nab all the best ideas and squeeze the life out of it, and then you'll be on to the next challenge. So I think we should think about charities as being ideally placed to spot opportunities, because you're close to your beneficiaries, to the communities, to the people who have needs, and you can spot those solutions. So I think you should keep thinking practically about how could technology help deal with whatever issue it is, whether you're an environmental charity or dealing with homelessness, or there will be a way in which you can innovate and be creative around the technology to help your beneficiaries and to extend the reach and improve the impact of your charity.
Yeah, I'd like to just go back to something that Martyn said, which is about outcome. Because I think something we often forget is that simply by using digital technology, people can improve outcomes in all kinds of ways. So, for example, people can improve their health and well-being and they can reduce their social isolation, they can increase their financial inclusion, they can increase their social mobility. You know, there are a whole range, they can increase their political participation. There's a whole range of outcomes purely of using digital that we I think sometimes forget, which is one of the reasons sometimes I'm asked, why do we want people to go online? We don't want people to go online for the hell of going online. We want people to go online because it's going to help them or benefit them in some way. And because that's what's happening. So I think, you know, the indirect consequences or the indirect outcomes of simply having digital skills are absolutely transformational, and I don't think we should ever forget that.
Florence and Martyn?
I think sometimes the danger of saying, is there a particular issue which digital can solve and the third sector can help to do it, is often when we have that, then the money goes towards that particular issue. And what we maybe haven't tackled is when we're talking about digital inclusion, we're talking about beneficiaries, but it's the digital inclusion for a number of small charities, like my own, that if you're not in a position to even get the basics in place, whether it's a move to cloud-based, whether it's reviewing how you currently deliver your services, it will be projects that are funded rather than the infrastructure, and that knowledge and awareness of what the potential of digital is for the delivery of the things that you're doing and the outcomes that you're currently delivering will be lost, and that funding may well go to what is the big issue that we need to tackle, and we really need to challenge and tackle some of the lack of understanding and skills and infrastructure as well.
I know you and I have personally talked about this in the past, and I don't know if it's actually been solved yet. You know what's coming next. Some sort of exchange, you know, I want to contribute. Okay, I've got several charities that I back just now, MS and Social Bite, two charities that I support just now. But ideally, I have digital skills that can be transferable to other people. We've got people in this room just now which are digital by default, according to your stats at the start. So how can we not create some national hub where people who want to offer time and skills, as well as money, as well as going to the shops to sell, you know, to help, like, you know, different charitable shops in the high street, can then go towards charities who need that help or need that skill for creating a website or helping them with a social media strategy or helping them, you know, go fundraising, where we can actually find people who want to give and the people that need, and then just create that kind of ecosystem where everybody comes together. A simple, straightforward kind of exchange like Airbnb. You could book yourself out for doing something on a Saturday or go and sleep rough for a homeless charity. I would love to see that, because therefore I could actually contribute more, because I'm very, very busy, sadly, but I would love to do more if I could find something I could actually find a repository who people need, you know, who could actually benefit from my skills.
The Airbnb for volunteering?
Yes, back again.
And that kind of, we often talk about the Airbnb for X or the Uber for Y problem. In terms of the funding piece, I've been speaking to some UK-wide funders recently that have had calls open for some of these things for organisations to consider problems and how they might solve them with technology. And actually there's been a complete lack of applications from the third sector. And I think they realise that perhaps we're not, that in terms of delivering services digitally, thinking completely differently from the way that we're currently delivering our services is actually a step too far at the moment. So we actually need to, rather than saying pose the problem and some of the solution, we need to start further back and think about some of the common problems that we're not solving at the moment as the chat with those funders. Just quickly, is there any burning questions in the room? Hands up. Nope. Oh, is there?
It's not a question I've got, David. I don't know if there is one coming, but just a couple of plugs for things that are happening. So around social media, there's some really good guidance that's been developed. You know, worked the regulator, third sector labs, SCVO to get social media policies and guidelines, you know, to help. So you just Google it, crowdsource it, it's free, use it, steal it. That's what the internet is all about, you know. Look for it, find it, pinch it, adapt it, put it into your organisation. So there's lots of practical help out there. I think the idea about some kind of online digital skills bank, you know, to help would be fantastic. It would be very easy to organise. We'll put that to the WhatsApp group that's just started up amongst charity geeks. There's lots of ways you can crowdsource this. When I can't do something at home, I go to the internet, I just Google it, and I find the answer. I think we can do that around all this stuff, because somebody out there will be willing to help you.
Thank you. Just in the kind of closing moments, there's some of the other things that come up later today which might help in terms of the practical tools, the support, and organisations that are showcasing what they're doing. But we've talked a lot about things we should be doing, about the change that we need to make in organisations, how it's about people, not technology, but then we need to develop appropriate systems and manage the risk. At a time of constraining resources, how do we invest in this? How do we make some of this change happen? Florence,
I think it is just the willingness to accept that there are things there that you can use, you know, and it's overcoming the fear of the unknown, because it's not the unknown, it's stuff that we are using, or you know people that are using. There are free things that are out there, but still having that confidence to use them and look at what you're doing. When I went into Music in Hospitals, part of it was about looking at how we did things. You know, we talk about cultural organisation. How do we do things? Things had worked well there, but things could work better. And some of that was the boring and practical stuff of the server that we had, the database that we're using, all of those things. Now, that was just a conversation about things that people already used. It wasn't about saying this is part of our new digital strategy. It was how do we do these things better? How do we know more about the outcomes that we're producing because we'll have better information from a new database? All of these things were just part of the discussion about the work that we're doing. So some of those conversations can be done. I'd also put in a plug for, if people don't know about it, because I didn't when I started, was TT Exchange, where there's free or reduced software. You know, there's ways that you can access that, or reduced licenses or free licenses for different things. So there's things out there, but I didn't know about that. I had to find out, and the OneDigital programme was excellent for that. So some way beyond the programme, where can we access that information that will help us, and where can we access individuals that can help us? Please get in the queue behind me, because I'm speaking to Martyn after this first. Where can we access individuals, and where can we get the resources to make some of those minor changes for us, major changes, but for a very small investment, a minor investment from some funders.
Okay. Rachel?
No, I was just nodding vigorously. I mean, I think, you know, some people say we can't afford to do this. We can't afford to go digital. We can't afford to do things. In many ways, you can't afford not to. And I'm not being glib about that. And I'm not suggesting that you have to spend a huge amount of money that you don't have. But I think it's exactly as Florence has said. There is so much that within your organisation, by having a workshop, a brainstorm with your people, your staff, you can come up with ideas that will help to reduce overheads, that will help to increase how you reach the people you need to reach, which will increase how you get more donors and funders. Simply having some very basic system to allow you to take donations online is always, you know, will pay back, you know, almost immediately if you're a charity that receives donations. So, you know, there are simple things. Crowdsourcing, and I think the other thing is absolutely what Jess was saying earlier about talking to others and finding out how other people are doing it. Because quite often it's because people don't know about a small third sector organisation that's in need. People just don't know. So how do you crowdsource that information? How do you get out the fact that there is a need? How do you get that community engagement? And it may well be something, as Martyn has said, like a new online resource an online platform to do that.
And just another note of encouragement. I mean, Martyn's not the only geek with a social conscience out there. I've been really heartened, working in government, and a lot of the fantastic techie people who work for us are choosing to be in the public sector because they're driven by those values, and they will choose to work with charities because they want to help you with your good causes. So there is a willingness out there. So there are folk who understand this stuff who will be more than willing to assist you. You just need to find a way of hooking them in.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we're almost out of time. So before we go, I'm going to give you a question to think about. So and I'll give you some time to think about it. What's the one bit of advice that you would give to third sector leaders around digital and evolving their organisations for a digital world? Just to pick up what's going on in the rest of the day, this morning at 11:30 back in here, we have a session on showcasing digital. So we've got several organisations, including CivTech, coming in to talk about the outcomes that they're trying to achieve by delivering services digitally. At 1:30, we have 19 workshops going on in this room, across all the different tables, and that includes things like the Technology Trust, which Florence mentioned. It gives free software. We've got Ross from Third Sector Lab doing a session on social media. We have people talking about video conferencing, about communications tools. We have the Scottish Government talking about how you kind of design services. So there's lots of people freely volunteering their time to help you and lots of different topics. So please come along to that at 1:30. And then at 4 o'clock, we're closing today with Google talking about growing their charity online and what some of the free tools that you can use. So that's all in here. Out in the exhibition hall, we have the OneDigital stand, where we're talking about digital participation, and we can talk about the digital inclusion piece and how we can bring our service users along with us on that digital journey. We also have some interesting stuff to try out, which is some of the virtual reality, new technology. So please do come along, and we can give one-to-one advice on some of the topics that we've been talking about today. So please check us out in the exhibition hall. And yes, we at SCVO we've got our strategy, which is 3 strands, which is talking about digital participation and inclusion, digital evolution, which is actually how do we as organisations use this a bit more, and is covering all the things that we talked about today. And then the innovation piece, how do we have some shared infrastructure in the third sector? How do we develop new digital services like the ones that have been kind of outlined here? And how do we support collaboration in the sector around that? And that's fundamentally what we're trying to do, is collaboration, learning from each other, because not one person individually has the answer to all this. So just to come back to the panel finally, your bit of advice, David?
Yeah, okay, so I think I've said it already in this panel discussion, but I would encourage you to look beyond the technology. It's a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. So it's a tool. It can help you do the stuff that really matters to you. So the digital bit is a step along the way, but digital charities are better charities, and it's the better that matters, not the digital.
Thank you. Jess?
Yep, sound advice. So I'll try and think of something different then. I would say just don't be afraid to ask for help. Just, ask people, get advice, and go for it. Have a go.
I think don't be afraid of doing things differently. The world is changing, and your organisations will need to adapt and change within it. So I think within the parameters that we've talked about of risk assessment, don't be afraid to do things differently, and quite often you will absolutely have the answers within your own organisation if you bring people together to talk about them.
I think, I mentioned earlier on, start with the outcome. What do you actually fundamentally want to achieve? And then think about the technologies out there. Even if you don't fully understand the technologies, go and play with them. Go and have a think. How will that technology support that outcome? And that's how you can embrace digital into the business age.
Yeah, play with it. You won't break the internet.
You can't break the internet, Florence.
According to Jen, if you Google, you can break the internet. So that's my other bit of advice there. I think it may be heresy in a session like this, but if you're taking things forward, stop thinking about digital. Stop using the word because nobody's really clear what it means. It's what do you need to do, what are the outcomes that you want to achieve, and what tools are out there for you to use. And speak to people about the tools that they've been using, the approaches that they've been adopting. Start to look at a different form of language. It was when I stopped saying digital that I was able to actually more clearly see what was it we needed to do, what was out there, that why can't we use that sort of thing here to do this? And if you have those sorts of conversations with your staff, and even have those conversations with yourself, if you are the digital team, I think that's the best way of taking it forward.
I suppose I shouldn't let myself off with this one as well. I think my advice is similar, but it's fundamentally about people. It's about changing the way that we work and how technology can enable that and be more efficient and effective in the modern world by using some of these tools. But actually, most importantly, it's about the communities we serve, the people that connect with us, and their expectations, their wants, their needs, how we can serve them better. You know, we might not be able to provide the Amazon or Uber experience for our service. You don't have the resources to do that. But there's things that we can do that will deliver our services differently, potentially faster, quicker, and improve outcomes. So thank you very much to my panel, to Florence, to Martyn, Rachel, Jess, and David. I really appreciate your time. And thank you all for, again, making it through the snow to be here today. Thank you very much.
Well done.